this was the I don't know if I stopped when I got to this stage, but this was the one when I talked about what do you think about when you're drawing, and I think if you saw it, how quickly that came together, it's just again not thinking about it, just stuff. This is, I mean, I think this is just me. I love that bit there, and I love that bit there, and I love that bit there. You know, it's just we do it to please ourselves, don't we? If you don't, you're not doing it right. So, and that kind of leads me into what I'm going to talk about. I've actually prepared a bit of paper this time. Look, none of this unprofessionalness when I'm about to start filming, and I have to find some paper. So I thought I'd be a little bit more prepared. Right, yeah. So as I said, this is the the worthless. How many of you think that what you do is worthless? I know I do. So, but I don't care. I haven't been able to deal with that properly. But when I say properly, I mean in terms of, that's what I'm going to do. That lady there. I mean, it looks like a painting, that one already, and so it's probably going to end up looking like that. I mean, in terms of, about being prepared. This is a big thing for me. I don't know if this affects everybody, but this is something that's really quite critical. The paper has to, and I say this every time, but the paper has to be, the middle of the paper has to be my eye line. If I'm stood or sat or whatever, the paper has to be in the middle of my eye line. It's just something to getting things in the right place. That's all it is, so you don't have the foreshortenings, heads are too. I did a drawing or a painting of a friend of mine, and it was huge in here, so I was stood at it some of the time, and so I can't stand, really, there's not enough room, but I'll sit. But I was painting up, and his head ended up being too small because I couldn't stand to look at it, or stand back to look at it properly. I can't walk further back than I'm sat in front of it. It's only about it's probably 2.5 meters square, so it's it's tiny. But yeah, that one thing is really important to me. So I just if it's not, I tell straight away. I don't know if it's because I've done so many, which I think it is. And I remember thinking at the time, calculating the drawing distance and the position of everything, and building the easel thing on the side of the wall there. As I said, now it's just something natural. I need it to be like that. This thing of worthlessness, I think it was probably it kind of sort of stems from. It may even stem from childhood. I don't know. It's one of those things that people, you can get easily damaged. It just generally, not just about making art, but you can become easily affected by others, parents, adults, full stop, who will undervalue, undermine your value, and not encourage, the self-worth stuff. I think I might have suffered a little bit of that, and but it's probably a lot more to do with being an artist, because it's generally believed within society that, or not believed, but considered to be worthless. Get a proper job thing. So we all suffer that. So it's a consequence of that to some degree. And I don't think anybody who is serious about being an artist hasn't gone through that phase of feeling worthless. But the problem is with that, it's chasing the worth. It's chasing the, okay, so I'll make it worth something. And what's that mean? What does that mean? And this is why we're so attracted to people buying our work, attracted to that happening and then reoccurring. Unwittingly, we carry on doing what it was that made us worth something before. Oh, it's sold before, so I'll keep making those drawings, I'll keep making those paintings, I'll keep painting the same subjects. And even worse, I've said this before, there was a guy that said that, if you enter a competition and you don't get into the art's never a competition, but people like this are foolish. And they said, if you entered a competition and you didn't get accepted, but others did, you need to look at what they did and trying to learn from what they did. But what was he saying? He should copy what they did because that is acceptable. That feeds straight into the wrong kind of narrative, into the wrong kind of thinking. So I'm not really, I've not addressed the worthlessness thing in the same way as you think maybe that you should. I've not sat down and thought. I mean, there are different kinds of artists. So there are those that are genuinely genuinely understand their value, their worth. There are those that, and these are the most of these artists are like this. Those that are arrogant about it and they project this worth, value. They project it and exploit the ignorance of people by Kings of Clothes thing. But the for me, I'm not. Because I ducked out of because I did it as a job, not just the illustration, but as being creative full stop. That was my job. So I always had to have a worth, but it was always time dependent. How long did it take you to do it? It was never what the impact of the design or the illustration or whatever. It had never had any other value than time. So it was attached to how many hours did it take to do it. So everything was calculated. I mean, even when people sell a painting, you're on these groups and they'll say, what shall I charge for a painting? And somebody says, you should charge so much per inch, square inch. How ridiculous is that? But that's what people do. But the problem is that I'm not just thinking in terms of selling, the value of it to sell. I'm thinking about the value, your worth of it. Whether or not somebody buys it or something, or is irrelevant. It's how you value what you do. That I think that's probably what the way I look at it, because that's what keeps me going. It's basically because the value of doing this to me is so significant that it's irrelevant whether or not somebody wants to buy it or whether or not it meets a standard or whatever. Those things are irrelevant because the value to me is what it does for me. What I feel about. I've just done that, and I just said to you, I like that bit there, and that's kind of what I'm saying. That I like it because I like it. I do it because I like doing it. It's not a and there's the value. There's the value. And the other side to it, and I suppose is a little bit deeper than just simply pleasing yourself, is the fact that we create something from nothing. What else in the world does that? Apart from obviously kids, but I mean, what else creates something from? Well, even that's not something from nothing, is it? But that creation thing, it didn't exist before I brought this into the world thing. What value can you put on that? I mean, forget about I'm doing it to move people. I'm trying to tell people a story or capture beauty and all that kind of thing. Just I mean, because all those things are equally as valuable, but the fact that you just create something that didn't exist before, what's that? How can you not value it? It doesn't really matter whether or not. See, the worthlessness thing. It's the problem with that is that there are too many things that determine its worth. It's not worth anything because it's not as good as theirs. It's not worth anything because I've not done it in a particular way. There's all kinds of measures of worth. It's not worth anything because nobody buys it. It's just stuff like that, and those are the dangerous things. Those are the things that are going to drag you into a pit of depression, probably, and it's not a good thing to start analyzing. It's not good enough because or I'm not good enough because So I'm going to steer clear of anything like that. Comparison is I suppose the root of all that sort of stuff, but that's only driven by expectations. But it's once you take away the measures of worth, the comparison, the price, what sells, what the subject, the execution. We take all those away, and you're still doing it. It's got to be what's left is where the value is. The value is not in the price people pay for it, or the comparison with another artist. The value is not in that, or being able to do it in a particular way. That's not where the value is. I'm not saying I know where the value is. All I'm saying is that to use those measures as your near enough. It's nowhere near, but it's near enough. Let me just fix some of these distances. It's looking a bit cramped around in places. I think with things like this, I always try and the one last night was probably more a linear thing because it's a floating head. I think the floating heads tend to be like this, so that the focus on the shapes are in there, in that area. When you get into, and then you get into the sort of intermediate stages where this is probably not a good example, but where the backgrounds are equally important as the foreground. Everything is part of that process. So this is one of those that kind of thing where it's as much about the shapes that the backgrounds make as it is about in relation to the face, for instance, as it is about the face itself. So ideally, what this is the first stage is going to be getting these shapes right. That's the thing. So it's getting these shapes right across with the relationships and things. So yeah, it is still about getting the nose in the right place, but it's more about the distance of things. I mean, I can, things will evolve, and I'll fix things as I'm going along, and it will start. As you see, it starts to look like it should. But the problem I've got at the moment is I'm thinking too much about this worth thing, and not enough about the drawing. It's better if I ramble because I don't really interfere with the process. But I think it's a really important thing, this worthlessness. I think it's and there's loads of us suffer from it, and I've suffered from it probably all my life. And as I said, it's a childhood thing. But I wanted to be an artist, but couldn't be an artist because nobody wants to do that. Nobody makes any money doing it, all that kind of stuff. And coming from a particular background, the working class thing, it's wanting to earn money to pay, well, it's the same for all of us, I suppose, but wanting to earn money or doing something that will earn good money, as they say, is the objective. It's the goal. When I went to art college, I did graphics and advertising, and it wasn't a proper course, if you know what I mean. It was more of a industrial qualification. So basically, some body decided that the Society of Industrial Artists and Designers, basically, which, as it transpires, is that if you don't keep up with payments every year, they remove the qualification. Whoever decided that was this institution that delivered this course thought that was a good idea. Really, what was only in it for the money, which is kind of what educational institutions are all about. They're just about bombs on seats and just making loads of money and keeping themselves in very nice jobs. But I got to near the last year. I think it was a 4-year course. Was it 3? I can't remember. Anyway, and I got to near the end, and somebody offered me a job. So what are you going to do? The reason why I went to art college to do graphics rather than be a painter was to get a job. Somebody offered me a job. What am I going to do? I took the job, and I couldn't finish the course. I think the main reason I couldn't finish it, you can come back and put some work in. The main reason why I couldn't finish it, this is the daft bit, right? This is an industrial course. And it's the reason why it is an industrial thing, a professional body, if you like. There was another one, Society of Industrial Artists, and there was, which is unfortunate, the STD, Society of Typographic Designers. That was another one I did. And the reason why they do these is so that kids can get properly trained for industry. Now, I went and got a job, found out what they were teaching wasn't correct. It wasn't what the industry wanted. And I had to quickly learn from the people that were doing it, every day, the people that gave me the job. I had to quickly learn how to do it properly so that I could stay in the job. And there was no way I was going to bring back and show what I did in the real world in my final assessment, and it'd be anything like the work that the other students were doing, because I was doing it for real. The other students were doing it pretend. They were doing it to this whoever was delivering the course, and it was nothing like what it was in the real world. So I couldn't go back and complete it. So that's a story right there. But I suppose that the worst thing, from then on, it was always about, as I say, it was the hours you put into it that determined the value. And we tried all the time. When I got to be creative director at Plumtree, and well, even before, really, when I was an art director, we always tried to make it clear to the client that this was not just about the hours. We're going to make magic happen with what we do. We're going to affect your profit line, your bottom line. And the value is there. It's not in the how long it took us to do it. It's the Salvador Dali thing. I don't know whether it's a true story. He was asked to design a bottle for a perfume. It might have been Chanel, but I can't remember. And he'd not done anything. And he turned up to the press conference to launch this bottle, and he got it was back in the day when they used bulbs, those little bulbs, you see them when I saw a film the other day, and these things were going off, these bulbs were going off. I used to have one, and it was like an explosion, like a firework going off, So he got one of these bulbs and he stood on it, crushed it, and said that was the design of the new bottle. I don't know if it's true or not. It may not be. Ask ChatGPT. And it's that. We try to sell that. We try to sell ourselves based on that it's more than just the hours we put into it. But people, again, it's still a creative thing. People are reluctant to recognize the value of creativity. I mean, in that sense, we were doing it in the real world. And I know I've talked about this before, but we were real designers then. It wasn't, let's push a mouse around and use a template kind of design, which that then killed the industry that I knew. And people just became dependent on, as I say, templates, which suited the graphic design. Well, it suits the graphic design industry because it's generally a trend-driven thing. The trouble is that the people that make the trends are the people that did it without the equipment, and now we're running out of those people. And the kids are now thinking, oh, what template should we use now? You know, there are some people that can still do it. By the way, I've got a friend of mine who still is older than me, and he's still doing it, and he's an amazing designer. But people, they're far and few between now. He does use the Mac, but he uses it because he uses it well because he can do it without the Mac. You know what I mean? Which is always the sign of a good designer. I think it has nothing to do with the equipment that he uses. But the value was always never seen. It was never acknowledged. And it has to say, it's kind of a societal thing towards creativity. It's just, it's almost like there's some kind of determination set down somewhere that we must not let artists think they're of any worth, you know, or else we've had it. You know, they're gonna take over the place. Yeah, I think it's probably why that those that have a high degree of self-worth come across as they do. You know, sort of almost, it's arrogant and aggressive. I think that's why they do it, because they've spent, like the rest of us, so much time being told that and then they get some kind of recognition, so they go completely. You know, they inflate themselves completely, and all of a sudden they're just these arrogant so-and-sos that come across as such. You know, there's quite a few we can think without me telling you that are like that. But the damage, I think, that I had, the damage of you're worthless, you're going to get a proper job kind of thing, and then you know, the continuous proving of or measuring what you do by the time it took you to do it and all that sort of thing. I think that constant kind of pressure just made me run away from the value, you know, run away from the designation of any kind of value to it. So when people ask me, you know, what would it cost to buy that painting, I can't give people a value. I can't. You know, you could say things like, if you have to ask, you can't afford it, and all that sort of stuff. The old Rolls Royce approach. But I think if I'm faced with that option, what's it worth? My immediate reaction is to withdraw. You know, to withdraw from the conversation in terms of what's it worth, because it brings back all the bad memories of trying to justify what I do. You know, I'm doing this because it's worth this. This is what I'm doing this for, and I've done that many times. I bought this. I've justified buying a special camera to do a job because it's going to make me loads of money. Not because I wanted to buy that special camera, because I wanted to create something special. It was because which it was, that's what I wanted, but I had to justify it either to myself or to whoever was funding it. You know, if it was a budget thing from the studio, or if it was, you know, I had to prove it to somebody else. Enough said. So as I say, I withdraw from that argument. I don't attempt to designate a value to it, which then leads me on to the the real examination of value. You know, this is what it does to me, what it is to me. I think that's it's a good thing that I do withdraw, because then I ask the question of myself, well, what is it? You know, what is it? How does it, what's the worth I place on it? Is it valuable to me? So that, as I said, by withdrawing from the I can't give you a price sort of situation, I get into this self-examination of why I do it, and I suppose in a way it reaffirms why I do it. Because if I'm not going to sell it, if I'm not going to earn a living doing it, why am I doing it? And a lot of people would say that to you. I mean, a lot of people I know would say that. Why are you doing it if you don't make any money at it? I do it because I just it brings me great joy. That I think that's the value I place on this, and since, you know, I've done this for so long, or you know, I've been creative for so long. I've just seen somebody saying that art isn't a sprint; it's a long distance run, and in a way, it's true that, but that implies there's a destination. You know, you're working towards a destination, and you're not really. You're just you're being creative. I can't even say making work, because work associates with value, doesn't it? So it's not even that. It's just, you're just being creative. You're bringing forth something that is really priceless. But even saying that implies that it meets some criteria. You know, it's worth more than this. It's worth so much more than that it's priceless. It's not, again, it's trying to put it into the real world context all the time. That's how we're brought up. Everything has a price. You know, that's a famous, you know, the world's run by people that say things like that. But my answer to that is that what I do hasn't got a price. Because you can't buy what this does for me. I can't buy this kind. You know, I get one of those tickets where you can jump out of a plane thing. You can't. You know, there is none of those. You know, red letter days, as they used to call them. For me, you can't. There is no price on this for me. I could not buy what this brings to me. Which is I know, try and get your head around that. It's if I can't, you know, what is it? As I said, I do it because of the joy. I do it because of the cancer and the determination to live a joyful life. I do it because of that, and you know, every day matters, sort of thing. But there are so many artists, and that was me working towards this definition of value, that if I do it this way, if I do it that way, if I'm as good as this or as good as that, then I'll be able to sell it and I'll be able to pay the rent. And it's terrible. I mean, and that's the truth of life. That's the truth of being an artist. You've got to have those constraints, if you like. I mean, I don't have to have those constraints, and it's not, you know, I'm fortunate in that respect, but it's taken me 65 years to get into that position where I don't have to think of it as a career or a way of paying the rent. But had I got the strength when I was younger, the mental fortitude to see it through, to stick it out, to go and work at a, you know, McDonald's or whatever, and Amazon, like I went to Amazon the other year. If I got the strength to do that early on, then I think I would have still made great work. Not saying I would have sold it anymore. I still think that I've got a psychological issue with placing the value on what I do, but I think things would have been different. You know, I would have been in a different place, shall we say. I'm pretty sure that I wouldn't have got the cancer, because I think that was, I can place that down to 2 jobs that I had, and the stress that those 2 jobs placed on me are etched in my memory. I'll tell you, one of them was particularly nasty, and steelworks in the UK, Tartar Steel. That was a terrible job for me. It was the individuals that I was involved with, and but the one prior to that was also an equally nasty thing. But these were life-absorbing jobs. You know, it wasn't just a case of creation as such. It was more because I was programming stuff as well at that time, and so there was a lot of pressure, technical pressure, and clients that were not understanding of the nature of what was being done, and consequently it was much about their ignorance as it was about the job itself. But anyway, enough said, I think, about that. But like I say, it's the value thing, the worth thing, for me is a culmination of my life. I think that's what it is. And I've got to a point where I have to do this not to survive, but to live, if that makes sense. So if I don't do this, then I'll probably die in a creative sense. If I don't express I'll bring my creativity into the world, I'll probably die. And that is creatively, not physically. I might, but hopefully not. But that's how I feel about it. So dying in my creativity would die, and I think leaving it alone, the 30-year break was a way of dying, creatively. I don't think it died because I'm not sure that creativity does die. I know it doesn't get old. The same thing, that this is the thing that people can't switch on to. I talk about the creative child, curious child. That creativity, that curiosity you had as a child hasn't gone away. It's just got buried with the crap that life's put on top of it. That's all that's happened. So it hasn't gone away. So the trick to doing this is to uncover that curious child. That's the secret to doing this, is to take off all, which is kind of what I've done, because I don't have to do it to pay the rent. I don't meet anybody's criteria. I don't exhibit. I don't want to get involved with other groups, if you like, movements. So there's nothing. All the pressures of, because that's one of the things that I'm sensitive to, and you probably are as well. I think all creatives are, but I'm sensitive to external forces. Not in a necessarily damaging way, but in a kind of influential way. And this is the thing about me looking at other work, and this is also what you will probably experience, that looking at other artists' work could have I'd say detrimental, but it can not be detrimental. But it can actually have a significant influence on the way that you work. But I don't have any of those things. So because I extract myself from situations where I'm being drawn into things, which is what happened when I was working. But I did it because I needed to, feed the kids. But the things that would normally be influential in my determination of value and the pressures that they'd bring, the rent thing, paying the rent would inevitably mean I got to find a value on what I do in order to earn enough, You know what I mean? So if one painting's worth £100 and I need £1,000 for the rent and all the rest of it, you know. So, but I don't have those things, so I don't need to put it onto a scale, a value scale of any kind. So my way to deal with the worthlessness is to not consider the worth, basically, because to consider the worth will only result in negative things happening. It's worth this because they're sold. It's worth this because it's the same as that. It's worth this, or it's not worth this because it's not as good as that. That's the killer. So that's the one that's going to destroy your self-worth in a way, because it is going to do that, isn't it? Because you're comparing it to somebody that is selling, for instance, that they're successful, and at the same time deeming what you do to be worthless, and that you're a failure because of it. So it's as I said, determining the worth of what you do can be a terrible thing, a real a destroyer of your creative world, I suppose. The problem, I think, the trouble with the art world is geared towards that. It's geared towards worth and evaluation by comparison. I've heard people talk about things that, not comparing them. And I think so. There are some people, great artists and people who like, appreciate art, who can understand art for what it is. This, and it's different every time, by the way. It's not always, but it's this thing about, this world would be or is a better place for this thing existing. There's that kind of thing. So whether or not it's about whether it moves you, whether or not it brings something to an environment that wouldn't have been there if it wasn't. I'm not talking about decoration, but I am. The existence of, say, a great painting in a great building or a hall or a church or a chapel, those they exist to amplify something within that, and they also bring something to it, so there are people that think like that think of art as its contribution to existence rather than just a example of skill, because that's the go-to place, and that's the reason why you think it's not worth anything, because my skills aren't as good as their skills. It's that kind of thing. But that's a silly thing to do, and to think about art. No way of thinking about art. It's not. It can't be. It can't just be about skill. Otherwise, you're the reason why AI is doing so well, because you think it's all about skill. And so a machine can copy and emulate skill. Whether it was making biscuits back in the day to making paintings now, it was still a machine that was doing it. I still prefer homemade biscuits, don't you? So I just said the worth thing, the worthless or being worth something. I duck that question. I duck out of that. What's it worth thing, and that's my way of dealing with it. So I don't really have an answer for feeling worthless or worth or having value. I don't have an answer for that, and that's okay, because that's my answer. but it's only happening because I've dodged the question. And as a result of dodging the question, I asked myself, what is it? What is the worth to me? Because that's the only person that matters. I said earlier when I started, we're doing this to please ourselves. Don't forget. So when somebody asks that question, then it qualifies, because I was banging on about the reason thing being the most important thing when you're doing this. The reason that you do it is the reason it works. It's not, or it ends up the way it ends up. So, the reason you're doing it is to make a copy of a face, and you haven't got the skills to copy the face, then the reason is the reason why it turned out the way it did. And it's also the reason why you should spend 10 years learning anatomy or whatever. You know what I mean? But getting to that reason to do it is the answer to it. So in terms of the worthlessness, what that has done for me is that it helps me to establish my reason, and that I think is the most important thing. I mean, it could be that your reason is to do it like everybody else and please the galleries and all the rest of it. That's perfectly fine. Just be aware of it. That's all. I suspect there's more of us that feel that what we do is worthless than there are those that think it's worth millions of pounds. The general, I think, or the ordinary guys like us who are just doing this because we like to draw or we like to paint or whatever. To the normals like us, we're not. We're just gonna fall foul of the psychological dangers of it because we're not thinking about it in the right way. We're kind of looking at it as a craft thing, as a skill thing, as a technique thing, and that in that respect, its worth is attached to outcome, and if the outcomes, then it must be technically well executed or meet a particular standard or whatever, then we're always running that risk of it, the designation of worthlessness. But the problem with that is that I'm rambling on a bit. I think I've kind of lost my thread. I'm still focusing a little bit on this, but I think the designation of worthlessness shouldn't be determined by, or worth shouldn't be determined by somebody else. That's the thing, and it does. And you don't get in that exhibition. It doesn't sell if it gets in the exhibition. Then it's seen as being worthless. Or you feel it's worthless because nobody wants to buy it, nobody wants to show it. You think it's worthless. It takes a certain kind of strength, I think, to override that. I don't think I could. I think I can now, because really, I kind of care and I don't care. I care that people get it. That's what I care. I don't care whether or not they think it's as good as so-and-so's or as the same, this, that, and the other. I don't care about that. I think most people don't get what I'm trying to do anyway. But let me get this. Something like that. I can continue to ramble. Yeah. It's okay. I'm just telling myself it looks good. I wanted to do something. You know, she's like sort of to one side. She's just to one side. I wanted to do something like that. I just thought it was more. I don't know why. I just seen this woman that she makes these amazing, like this, figures like this, and it's all gold leaf and whatever else, but they're always a bit odd. And the composition is a little bit odd, and I quite like the way it was offset. So that's what drove me to this this subject. But yeah, think back to the thing. It's come full circle now. I'm talking about pleasing myself again. You know, so yeah, you see, I think that this part of doing what we do is a whole new component in a way of being an artist. It's as important as whether you're using the right brushes to understand why you do it, and which is, as I say, inexorably linked to the value of it. And but I don't see the thing. I struggle with this because to me it's a simple determination. I just like doing it, right? Whether it turns out as I want it to, or if I don't want it to turn out at all in a particular way. But if I feel it's failed because I didn't connect to the essence of the character, the image, you know, the situation, if I didn't respond and capture the essence properly, then it's kind of not done what it should be doing. I think that's the designation of failure for me, that it didn't capture the essence regardless of the execution. But that's just part and parcel of this worth thing, because I don't have a definite outcome and expectation for something. Other than I want it to feel the way I feel about this. You know, this has to feel like that image feels. So if it doesn't, then it's failed, basically. But it's not failed in to a lot of people. It failure to a lot of people is that it's not technically correct, or it's not, you know, it's not done in a certain way to appease the, you know, the technique gods. So anyway, to sum up, I should do that, shouldn't I? I should say, to sum up, what we do is so valuable that it's almost invaluable, and it's impossible to put a value on it because it's so valuable. And that's not, I don't want to say it's priceless, because that just puts it into the world of price of oil or grain or whatever. You know, that's a different kind of priceless, or even, you know, the priceless works of art that are bandied around, but at the time they were worthless. And that there's the irony of it all. You know, that Van Gogh couldn't sell a painting because they were worthless, right? But now they're almost priceless. I don't think they are. I think you can still buy one if you've got enough millions. But if you know what I mean, it's all because he's dead. No, it's because there are other forces at play that people want to manipulate the art world in such a way that it becomes, you know, it has elements that are commodities. So it's a whole new nasty world that I think artists shouldn't be involved in anyway. Well, they are, you know, they like Damien Hirst and people like that that understand and manipulate these things. But for us menial minions that are never going to have work that's worth millions, we have to understand where we sit in these things. You know, the and therefore, I suppose that and that then leads to if you're going to, if it's about the value of something, if worth is about the value of something, then you have to find a value other than monetary value in what you do, and not not in terms, because I think if you were to do that, to do it not in monetary terms, and look at it in terms of what it brings into the world, then the whole thing, your worth then is on a completely different scale. It can never be on the value scale. It can never be on the financial monetary scale, or shouldn't be. But I don't think people think about it. But the kind of thing people I come into contact with, I don't think they think about it in terms of their worth being attached to some kind of monetary value. I think they're just pleased to sell it down the local library. Those dodgy exhibitions that libraries have. They just stick them all over the wall. You've seen them; they stick them all over the wall. It doesn't matter what it is. They put all kinds of things next to each other. The one that I was involved with a year ago, I think it was, and they were putting really successful photographers, experienced photographers, we would say, successful photographers. He wouldn't be putting his work in a local library if he was. Anyway, he was experienced, let's put it that way. And they were putting his work next to somebody who just finished work, and she was embroidering fish or something. I can't remember what it was. It was a farm scene, I think, right next to each other, And it wasn't fair on either of them, because both of them were impacted by this proximity of and juxtaposition of the other's work. But they're not think the photographer probably thinks of it in terms of value, but the other person wasn't, monetary value. And that's not, that's not taking away anything from worth. They were quite happy that they were able to exhibit and they were next to a successful photographer. So one of them was pleased with the outcome. I know before I stopped, I was exhibiting in Holmfirth Art Exhibition, and I put one in of Paris. It was just a land. It was the Royal Gardens. Those green chairs in the Royal Gardens. It was one of those, typical. And I was right next to the organizer and his work, and my work sold, or that one piece. Let me put one in. That sold, and his didn't. And next year, when I exhibited again, or put work in again, because it was a kind of, if you pay, you get in kind of thing. And he put me on the bottom floor with all the fish painters. He didn't put me next to his work anymore because he didn't want the embarrassment of mine selling and his not. So some artists have a real problem with other artists' success, I'm afraid. But and again, that's the worst comparison stuff. And he needed to maintain his credibility and position and worth by making sure that his work sold and it wasn't overshadowed by somebody else's work, because again, it's a game that people play, unfortunately, and the art world, I think there's a lot of people play it like that. But the magic thing about this is that once you establish that it's not somebody else's decision to determine your worth, everything changes. The way you approach something changes. It's a little bit like, I don't care what you think about my work kind of approach. And then once that happens, your skills change. The way you approach what you do changes. And the outcome changes as well. And I think that is when the real you starts to show. But you can't be in that place where you're always thinking about its worth in relation to. and equally your worth as a result of that comparison, because you probably beat yourself up every time you start doing something, or every time you consider to do something. I can't do that because it's just beyond me. I'm not good enough for that. And then when that sets in, you're on the road to stopping, which is kind of what I did. But it wasn't a worth thing. It was a frustration thing, and not having someone able, that I could talk to that would break all this down. I just stopped. I mean, I was 30, whatever, about 38, something like that. And so it wasn't like I needed. I think everyone needs somebody, but I wasn't really needed. I needed an adult, if you know what I mean. I needed somebody who'd gone through it like me. So, but I didn't know anybody like me. I didn't know anybody that could be objective about it and analyze why I was feeling the way I was feeling and how I could fix it. In fact, you know that thing yesterday I told you about, the first oil that I did, and somebody said that it had all the, the qualities and mystery and all whatever else stuff he went on about. And I said to him, yeah, but fortunately I was able to extricate myself from that path because there's an artist, a woman, Hoffman or somebody, and it was like one of her paintings before she became what she is now. I don't think she was doing that kind of thing when I did that, but it was certainly some traditional kind of style. And immediately he compared it to traditional styles, and I'd learnt at that point, I think, that following the traditional route, using traditional work as a measure and as a goal was a bad idea. Thankfully, I didn't follow, but I had nobody to tell me that at the time, and I was too busy trying to paint like Sargent, the watercolors, and I was in sort of groups that were watercolor bias, and they all had. Admittedly, it was all chocolate box stuff. It was all seaside painters, but nevertheless, I was in that scene. And I've said this before. I did a demo of the week, and I said at the time, the last thing I want to do is hang around with old duffers, just colouring in basically. And so I kind of got the beginnings of where I am now in my head. But I didn't really know how to go about doing it, and I needed to feed the kids, so I didn't paint and draw or anything for the 30-odd years. But this is the thing. This is the stuff I'm talking about with the worth thing. This kind of stuff doesn't get talked about enough with what we do. And as I said, I'm not sure that art colleges will help you with I know they didn't with Jackson, help him with the mental, when he did his degree. They didn't help him with the mental side of doing this, and which is the most important thing. However, he didn't go to one Hester someone or other from Sheffield. We live near Sheffield, so we went to the Sheffield University, and we met this woman called Hester. She was a performance artist, and she said to him, and he should have really gone to this place, but the problem with Sheffield was underfunded, and there were 6 artists sharing one space the same size as what I work in. So there were 6 of them working in shifts, if you like, in this. So it was unacceptable. It was just, from our point of view, it wasn't the right facility. But she said to him, I won't teach you paint, but I'll teach you how to think. And I thought at the time, that's the course I want to be on. But he didn't. He didn't because of these practical considerations. There was no way that six artists were going to thrive in a 2.5 meter square cube. It just wasn't going to work. So unfortunately, he didn't go. So he went to Lincoln, and none of them taught him how to think. In fact, the guy that was running it was a complete deadbeat. And I think he still is, and he's still getting his, his £250,000 a year and whatever it is. But he was. I remember Jackson coming out and saying, "What a plonker, shall we say, to use a euphemism." But and they're still there. They're still poisoning minds, or not poisoning minds, which however way you want to look at it. And but this thinking thing, I don't think, or understanding what it is that we do, and and why we do it. It's not something that's spoken about widely. In maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you can tell me that there's a university out there somewhere that actually considers all this stuff. I hope there is. I really do. Anyway, I'm going to leave it at this because there's quite a bit of work to do on it to just tighten everything up and but I say put the tone on the background. It's going to end up being a painting-like feel about it, but you can see it's how it's working out. Like I said, I like the off-center thing. It's inevitable that it's going to have a background on it and become a painting like charcoal, but because it needs that. Floating heads don't need to be justified by their environment, but the environment, there's cast shadows in the background, as you can see, or a cast window in the background there. So all of that just gives that a reason. As you can see that something that needs to be simulated, and I can also fix things. I can fix the the angle of her face there, up there like that. It's a little bit. I can bring that in there. There is a highlight on the side of her face which is not really working because of the fact that it's onto white. So it sort of gets a bit lighter there. But once I put the background on and you can see the shape better, then it'll be fine. But as I say, the main thing is it has to feel like the image. This is the thing. I mean, the enjoyment of doing it is partly capturing the feeling, and I think that's where my worth lies, my self-worth lies. So anyway, I'll love you, leave you, and I'll catch you in the next one this afternoon. I think we're coming back on, and hopefully I'll have this finished by then. So I'll show you what it looks like.